I've had so many conversations over the last couple of years with, somebody's like, oh yeah, man, I go to church, or I'm a Christian, or yeah, dude, I believe 100% of the Bible. And then you get two questions in and you quickly realize like they really probably haven't read it. I'm not dogging on anybody, but you can just kind of quickly tell. And my goal here is not to tear anybody down or anything like that. My goal here is actually to help somebody, and here's why. I grew up in the church, and when I say that, I mean it was as if we almost lived in a church. That's how affiliated we were with the church growing up. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. He preached for over 60 years. I got aunts and uncles and cousins that go to church, and faith is like a big part of the family. Mother and father that drug us to church whether we wanted to go or not, 3 times a week. But it's really interesting. Up until my late 30s, I actually really didn't understand truly what the Bible was. And that sounds crazy. But the more I've talked to even people who go to church, or Christians and believers, and even people who attend Bible studies, or people who have been in the church for years, they really don't know much about the Bible. They can quote John 3:16 or like Jeremiah 29:11, and they can go down the road of these verses like that, but they don't really know what the Bible is. What's the story? What's the point? Where did it come from? And so in an attempt to help you with years, I've spent years of me not knowing was what I was going to say. I spent the last 3.5 years digging into it. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a scholar. I didn't go to college for it. The only thing that I've done is just stuck my nose in it and based everything that I'm going to tell you off of what I've found. Okay, I'm not giving you my opinion based upon somebody else's opinion. This is from my perspective, in hopes that if you are wanting to open this book, this Bible, and you are wanting to know where to start, what is it, how do you read it, I want to address that really quick. Now, before I get started, number one, people have devoted their entire lives to studying the Bible and never gotten to the bottom of it. So there's no way I'm going to even be able to scratch the surface in a few minutes in a video. Imagine yourself being blindfolded and then led out into the woods, okay? And all of a sudden somebody takes the blindfold off and you're looking around and they say, all right, now walk to the road. Okay, that's all. That's it. Walk to the road. Well, you're looking around like, well, where do I even start to walk? That's the basis of this video. My goal is just to spin you in the right direction and say, walk that way. Okay? I'm not going to go through all the creeks and the hollers and the hills and the different tree species and the fauna and the flora and all that. No, that's years. All I'm doing in today's video, spinning you, pushing you like that. Okay? Giving you a direction. And I want to try to make this easy. So before I start my work day, I want to go ahead and handle this business. Because it's funny how these things work. I have been making notes, and this is my journal. I've been making notes in my journal for years about, what's the Bible, how to read the Bible. And over the last year, going on a year now, I've had so many conversations with so many people about this very topic. Mainly men. Mainly who I talk to about these things is men. I really think that that's my audience is men. And it's not that women can't listen to this. You're more than welcome to. But I'm being led to, like men, that's my audience is men. So anyways, without further ado, let's jump into this. First of all, what I was going to say is, gosh, sometimes you'll find I get off on rabbit trails. It's hard for me to stay on track sometimes. What I was going to say was, I've heard this thing repeatedly so many times over and over and over and over in conversations with different people and podcasts, and it's like every time I turn around, it's like, there it is, there it is, there it is, and here it is this. People going, I don't really understand the Bible. I don't really know what that is. And the straw that broke the camel's back was yesterday. I was listening to a Sean Ryan podcast where he had the founder of Real News, No BS on his podcast. Sean Ryan did. And the few sentences that were discussed was, this guy says, yeah, man, I've been trying to read the Bible. And Sean's like, man, me too, that's great to hear. And they're kind of going back and forth about the Bible. And then all of a sudden Sean's like, dude, I'll be honest, I don't freaking get it. I don't freaking get it, you know? And I'm not coming down on Sean. I'm fired up that he's on a journey looking for that. He is seeking. But he said, I don't really get it. I don't understand it. And so my goal here is just to make this real simple and lay it out for you if you want to dive into the Bible. Okay, so first of all, baseline. What is the Bible? The Bible, you may think it's a book. It's actually not really a book, as much as it is a compilation of books, a series of books. So imagine walking into a library and all of a sudden you've got all these books up on a shelf, you know? And there's 66 different books up on that shelf. That's what the Bible is. So imagine taking all those 66 books and going, putting a front cover and a back cover on it. That's a Bible, okay? It was written by over 40 different authors, 3 different continents, Africa, Asia, Europe. It was written in 3 different languages. There's 2 major sections in the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is 39 books. The New Testament is 27 books. 3 different languages are, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic, and the New Testament was written in Greek. Now, some of this doesn't really matter. I'm just giving you some foundational understanding of what this is. Okay, so over 40 different authors written on 3 continents over a period of about 1,500 years. That's the Bible. Let's see, what did I miss? It's about a third history, a third instruction, and a third prophecy. Now, let me just address the prophecy thing really quick. A lot of people think that prophecy is let me back up. Let me use myself as an example. Anytime I would ever hear the word prophecy, I would be thinking of weird Gandalf type crystal ball wizardry stuff, okay? And so most folks think prophecy is only telling the future. But actually prophecy can be one of 2 things. It can be telling what is going on right now. You are prophesying to the present. This is what's going on, and this is what is happening and why it's happening. That is another form of prophecy. So there's really the future prophecy and then the current, what is going on prophecy. Okay? But anyways, it's a third history, a third instruction, and a third prophecy. The Old Testament is about 77% of the overall page count, and the New Testament is about 23%. Now you may think that those numbers are irrelevant, so I'm going to slow down really quick. And I'm going to tell you why this is relevant. The Old Testament is about 77% of the first page count. The New Testament is about 23% of the first page count. Okay? So I'm going to stand my Bible up and go to about 77%. I am in the first book of the New Testament, Matthew. I'm in it. Okay? Why do I tell you that? Because these are little tricks to help you, okay? Because I'm actually going to send you 78% into this book to read. That's actually where I'm going to tell you to go first. Now that may sound weird, but that's kind of how the Bible's written. The Bible is written in a way that it's telling the narrative, it's telling the history, it's telling who the people were, it's telling the genealogy, It's providing the wisdom and all the proverbs and all the other nice meat in it. But the way that it's written, sometimes you'll read the Bible and you'll go, wait a minute, did I just read that? I feel like I just read that. I feel like I just read that a ways back. That's a pretty consistent theme in the Bible. Because you got to remember, it's a bunch of different books. So maybe if that book over here is talking about this story, sometimes this book over here talks about that same story briefly too. See what I'm saying? So you may be reading in one book, and it may be telling this story, and then 3 books later, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. It's kind of talking about that same thing. That happens a lot in the Bible, okay? The prophecy thing. There is, in the Old Testament, well, first of all, what's the Old Testament, what's the New Testament? Look at it this way. It's probably better explained, but I'm going to give you the, redneck on a carpentry job definition. What's the Old Testament, what's the New Testament? The Old Testament is basically from the beginning to right before Jesus, a couple hundred years before Jesus, okay? That's the Old Testament. From the beginning, like the beginning. I'm talking the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. From the beginning to a couple hundred years before Jesus. That's this section right here. The New Testament is from Jesus on. Now, it doesn't mean like from Jesus till 1908, no. These were all written, the New Testament was written in a very short period of time after Jesus' birth, life, death, resurrection. Now that last word, resurrection, I'm not going to stay on this, but in my opinion, that's the most pivotal, most important part of this entire thing. Okay? If the resurrection didn't happen, even if Jesus lived and died, if he was a real man who lived and died and was a good man, even if that happened, and was crucified, even if that happened, all of that can happen. Without the resurrection, you could take this and throw this in the river as far as I'm concerned. We can get into that into another video, but that's how important the resurrection is. And everything kind of leads up to the resurrection because that's the gospel. What's the gospel? The gospel means great news. Good news. Good news is what it means. What's the good news? The good news is the Messiah came to earth to die for our sins. Our Savior came to save us. That's the good news. That is gospel, okay? Greek, euangelion. That's the Greek word for gospel. It means good news. So when you open up the beginning of the New Testament, 77% in, you're going to go to the New Testament. You're going to go to the first book. That's the first of 4 books known as the Gospels. Why? Because it's 4 different accounts written by 4 different dudes about the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The Savior. The Son of God. The one who paid the penalty for our sin. The wages for sin is death. All that stuff going on. That. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. That's the Gospels. The Gospels. They tell the gospel. They tell the good news. So here's what you're going to notice is you're going to go 75, you're going to go, 3/4 of the way into the Bible. You're going to start at, I'm not going to tell you to start at Matthew, but these are going to be the first few books you are going to read. You're going to read the Gospels. And you're going to realize, wait a minute, didn't I just read this? Wait a minute, that kind of sounds like I just read that. It is, because it's like reading 4 different books from 4 different authors about the same story. Okay? I wish I had somebody tell me that simply when I was a kid. No one said that. No one told me that. Not a preacher, not a teacher, not a scholar, not a theologian, nobody. Because it was so common. It was so common thought that they just missed it. Oh, well, everybody knows this. No, everybody doesn't know that. And so you got to start with the basics, man. Here's the basics. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's the Gospels. 4 different accounts written about the same dude. 4 different authors, you're going to see different styles. Matthew was a tax collector. It's written like a tax collector. Luke was a doctor. It's kind of written like a doctor. You can kind of see it. John was like a good old boy. That's where I'm going to send you first. Go to the book of John. John is the best place, in my opinion, to start. Go to John. Read John. Now, after John, most folks will tell you, most folks are either going to say, just go to the Gospels, read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, that's one way. And look, this is my opinion. You can take it or leave it. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But after everything that I've read and understood, here's what I would suggest. Go to John and read John. John will cover the gospel. You'll have a pretty good understanding of what the gospel is after you read John. Then what I want you to do is actually go to Genesis. Read Genesis. Okay? Then I want you to go back to the Gospels. And I want you to read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay? Now why? Because it really helps give you an understanding about what is going on in the first 4 books of the New Testament, the Gospels. If you have some sort of understanding of what is the beginning of the Bible is, and the fall of man, and Adam and Eve, and Noah, and all of these things that are happening in Genesis and Exodus, Abraham, Moses, and everything that's kind of going on during that time, it helps to understand. So I would say, if you can, John, go to Genesis, read Genesis. Then go back, Matthew, Mark, Luke, okay? From there, the 5th book of the New Testament, that's called Acts. A-C-T-S, Acts. Where did the name of Acts come from? Think of it like this. After Jesus resurrected and ascended to heaven, over 400 witnesses saw this. Dude, actually, he walked out of the tomb. I mean, flesh, skin, bones, the whole 9. This was a human. Died, came back. Human, not a ghost. Skin. Ate a fish. Hung out. Talked. And then said, told you all this was going to happen. It was prophesied back in, Isaiah 53. You want to see some prophecy? Go to Isaiah 53, chapter 53. Old Testament, Isaiah, he was a prophet. He was saying, this is what's going to happen. Okay? Isaiah 53. Read that. Just read that, and then tell me what that sounds like after you read the Gospels. Tell me that doesn't sound like exactly what just happened hundreds of years later. That is one of thousands of prophecies that have came true in this book. They've been trying to disprove this for 2,000 years, and it ain't worked yet. Okay? Acts. Acts is the explosion of Christianity around Europe. Remember, it all started around the Mediterranean Sea, Northeast Africa, Western Asia, Southeast Europe, all around the Mediterranean Sea right there. And so after all this went down, you had what was called apostles that went out. Think of like a missionary, a messenger, a teacher, somebody who goes out to tell, to teach, to show, to proclaim. That's the word apostle. You're going to see that word. And you're going to learn about a man named Apostle Paul in the book of Acts. Okay? Formerly saw, hated Christians, arrested Christians, reportedly arrested Christians, and some of them were killed. This dude hated Christians. All right? That was the Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul goes on to basically become the gangster of the New Testament. Every preacher, every person up on the stage talking about Jesus, every missionary, every Christian sitting at home around a breakfast table eating a donut, they're all talking about Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul this, Apostle... So Apostle Paul is kind of like a dude that you're going to hear about and see a lot of. All right? Apostle is a teacher. A disciple is a student. Now there's apostle, a messenger, a missionary, a teacher. You get the point. So you got the disciple, who's the student. You got the apostle, who's the messenger, the one who... So originally you're kind of a disciple. You're a disciple when you're learning, and you become an apostle. That's that word. Now I'm going to throw this one out there. Here's some words you need to know as you're reading. You're also going to hear the word epistle. Epistle. Sounds a lot like apostle, but it's not apostle. It's called epistle. Apostle spelled with an A, epistle spelled with an E. What is an epistle? An epistle is a letter. Why does that matter? It's because a lot of the New Testament was when they essentially when they put the New Testament together, what it was is a lot of letters. So when we say it's a book, yes, these are books like 1st and 2nd Corinthians. I'm going to use that one as an example. Those are letters to the church of Corinth. The Apostle Paul is writing a letter to the church of Corinth. See? Corinthians. Church of Corinth. So a lot of those writings are letters. Those letters, the word for letter is epistle. Why does that matter? It's because I don't want there to be any confusion, because I've seen this happen quite a bit. When somebody will use the word epistle and they'll mistake it, or like as a misspelling, that they really mean apostle. They don't. There's an epistle, that's a letter. An apostle is a teacher and a messenger and a preacher type person. Disciple, that's the student. What else do we need to know? Oh, you're going to see some terms show up. You need to know what they are. Obviously, you're going to read about Jew, okay? God's chosen people, the Jewish people, Israel. You're going to learn a lot about that, in the Old Testament. It's going to be talked about a lot in the New Testament. All right? You're going to see these two words, Sadducee and Pharisee. This was another thing that really wasn't finitely explained to me, which was very confusing growing up. Because I kind of always thought, like, wait a minute, aren't Jews good? Well, yeah, they are, but there was a lot of that talk, okay? So let me just try to make this simple. I don't know if you can. Because it's not simple. It's really not. It's a very complex thing that's not very simple. But how do I make this as simple as possible? It's like this. God's chosen people, the Jewish people, Israel, Old Testament, okay? This is the story. The Bible is the story of God's chosen people being sent out, guided by God, told what to do, taken care of by God, and constantly time and time again turning their back on God. After he takes care of them and he says, just put your faith in me, and then they just turn around and they trip and they fall and they stumble, and it's just time after time they're messing up. Who's that sound like? That sounds like all of us. Okay? In the Old Testament, there was called the law. I'm not going to get into the complexities of it, but think of it like you've heard of Moses, the 10 Commandments, the stone tablets. I know you've heard of the 10 Commandments. Think about that as the law. So when you're reading the New Testament and you hear mention of the law, think of it like that. The 10 Commandments. That's what they're referring to. They're referring to the rules in the Old Testament that you had to live by as the Jews. The law, okay? They're not talking about a government law. They're talking about a religious law. So when you're reading the New Testament and you're talking about law, that's what they mean. They're talking about the rules, okay? The keepers of the law, there were two different groups of people. You're going to read about this. The Sadducees and the Pharisees. Let me tell you who they are without trying to make this confusing. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were both Jewish, but they were different types of Jews, okay? The Sadducees didn't believe in an afterlife. They didn't believe in angels, okay? And they were a little bit more of the elitist. Think of them like the upper echelon. They were a little more tied into the government. They were the one who bent the ear of the king and the government a little bit more than the Pharisees would. Not that the Pharisees didn't. It's just that the Sadducees kind of had a little bit... They had the keys to the Oval Office, if you know what I'm saying. That was the Sadducees. The Pharisees, also Jews, also lived by and under the law, just like the Pharisees, the law, the rules, the Ten Commandments, the people, the way it was in the Old Testament. The Pharisees, think of them as a little bit more like normal, everyday, average, middle America folks. All right? They were your average dudes. They were a little less affiliated with the government, still influential. They still had they still had the ear, but they weren't as tied into, okay? They believed in a heaven and angels and an afterlife. They believed in an afterlife. And they believed in, like the supernatural. Whereas like the Sadducees didn't. So that's your main differences. But think of it about this way. They both supported the law. They both supported the rules of the Old Testament. And they would walk around with their bags. I think they called them phylacteries. They had scrolls in them. Scrolls. The more scrolls you had, the more studied you were. So they would walk around with these big bags and all these scrolls, and they would stand up and they would debate each other, and they would meet Sadducees on one side and the Pharisees on the other, and they would kind of talk back and forth and they would kind of debate. But everybody looked at the Sadducees and the Pharisees as like the keepers of the law, the ones that are leading us. Okay? They hated Jesus. Hated him. Guess what they did to him? Yeah. They sent him off to be killed. That's what happened. That's who the Sadducees and the Pharisees are. What is a Gentile? You're going to hear Gentile. Gentile means non-Jew. That's what it means, non-Jew. So if you're not a Jew, you're a Gentile. You're going to see that word. And then you're going to read about circumcision, which is weird. Like, let's just be honest with it. The way that it's used a lot is just like there's a lot of talk about circumcision. Circumcision was the covenant that God made with the Jewish people as like, those are my people, you circumcise as like, this is our agreement. Okay? It could be better described, but it's founded in the Old Testament. The foundations of circumcision within the Jewish people is founded in the Old Testament. And so, as a Jew, it was to be circumcised. And when you see these writings, these epistles written by Paul, letters written by Paul, when you read these books in the New Testament and it mentions that, just know that was like common practice as a Jew. Okay? So, let's sum all this up. Go to the New Testament. Go about 80% into your Bible, 81, 82% into your Bible. Go to the book of John. Start in the book of John. Read John. Then go to the very beginning and read the first book of the Bible, Genesis. It's actually very captivating. It's pretty cool. It's a really awesome book. It's a really awesome book. Go there and just read that. And if you want to, read Exodus, but I would just say stay with Genesis. The reason I'm sending you there, again, is to give you a little bit of context on what they're talking about. After you get done with Genesis, now go back to the New Testament. Read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Once you get done there, go to the book of Acts. That's the act of the explosion of Christianity. That's basically when it exploded. You know, there's this fallacy that Christianity is like the white man's religion. What's really funny is that couldn't be further from the truth. That's just what you're told. The epicenter of Christianity was essentially Northeast Africa, Western Asia. That's like the epicenter. In 350 AD, there was a king in Ethiopia that made Christianity the country's religion. I'm just going to let you go ahead and wrap your brain around that. So if you think it's just the white man's religion, actually it didn't start here. That's just what you're told. The act of Acts Okay, fifth book of the New Testament. You're going to read that one after you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then after that, you're going to read Romans. Romans was a letter written by the Apostle Paul, who you're going to learn about in Acts. He wrote that letter to the Church of Rome. It's known as like the Apostle Paul's his best writing is Romans. Basically, it's just a bunch of mic drops. It's just a giant bag of hammers. That's Romans. That's what Romans is. It's going to clear up a lot of things. It's also going to probably create some questions for you, which is good because that will send you off to try to get some more answers, just like I did. But it'll clear some things up. And basically what Paul's doing is he's writing this to the Church of Rome and saying, this is what's going on because of Jesus. Because Jesus came, He lived, He died, He was resurrected, He's our Messiah, He is the Son of God. It changes everything. This is the new covenant. And because of that, this is what we do now. That's what Paul's saying. This is now. Before Jesus, yeah. But now, because of Jesus, this is kind of how it shakes down now. That's basically the book of Romans. And all of that applies till today. So, I know that was probably a lot longer than I expected it to be, but I hope that really helps you. Have a good day. I got to get to work. Love you. Bye-bye.